Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the soundbite. To my left is Ben Kinsley, who is a co-host and sponsor.
Yes.
Could you give us a little 2-minute blurb of Imperium?
2 minutes, that's generous.
Well, that's a lot. Never mind, make that 2 seconds.
2 seconds. So I have a consulting firm called Imperium Advisors, and we do a whole bunch of different things, including helping nonprofits and political campaigns find their audience and reach their audience, and we also do a little bit of public relations and public policy development, so a little bit of all over the place.
He's our policy wonk. We go to Ben for ideas on policy. And our guest tonight is John Sayles, who is the CEO of the Vermont Food Bank. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Pat. It's
been
great to
a
be
while.
here.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
So we are going to talk about hunger and food insufficiency. And just before the show, we got started talking about food insufficiency, and it's got a definition, and we should talk about that. When I talked to you last, it's a couple of years ago, sadly, shame on me, you were telling me that 1 out of every 4 Vermonters deals with food insufficiency, which I thought was just outrageous in this state, agricultural state, and we can't feed our people. Now I understand it's 1 in 7, but maybe you could talk about that. We sound like we're going in the right direction, but slowly.
Well, you know, I think the movement in the right direction is all about the economy, because really, you know, whatever you want to call it, hunger, food insufficiency, food insecurity, it's an economic issue.
Right.
There is no shortage of food in this country. There's no shortage of food in Vermont. We have grocery stores that are full, overflowing with food. It's really about people not being able to afford that nourishing food for themselves and their families. Right. So, you know, while the numbers of people on 3 Squares Vermont, which a lot of people know is food stamps,
right,
in Vermont it's called 3 Squares Vermont,
right,
has been dropping over the last 5 or so years, and the statistics might look better. What we see at our partners all across the state, and those are food shelves and meal sites, homeless shelters, after-school centers, senior centers, we're seeing just as many people coming in needing help.
Because although we're talking food, I think I had reached out to you originally to talk about homelessness.
Right.
Because we had a guest on our show who's kind of a political wonk. He talks a lot about what's happening in Montpelier. And we said to him, what is the most serious thing that you see there, that you feel in Vermont going forward? And he said homelessness, which surprised me. I don't know why. Maybe because you don't see as much as you might see in New York City or other places like that. They're sort of hidden, if I may.
Well,
but that must got along with food too.
I would say that hunger is hidden in Vermont also.
Right.
And I wouldn't disagree that homelessness is one of the, if not the biggest challenge facing us in Vermont. I mean, I will often say to people, if you want somebody to be food secure, first make sure they have housing.
Oh, interesting.
You know, people, it's Maslow's hierarchy. You know, what's at the bottom?
Oh,
It's food, shelter, warmth.
Right.
And if people don't have those things, then there's no way they're going to get to the next level. And really what we want people is to be up several levels where they're feeling a sense of belonging in their community.
Right.
I mean, to me, that's when people start giving back, and that's when community starts to grow.
Yeah.
And until people have those basic needs met, they really don't have the mental bandwidth to be able to participate in our communities the way we all want to.
Right. Yeah. And before Ben asked his question, we were talking before the show that even when you look at the McMansions, my husband says to me, "What's a McMansion?" And I don't even know where that expression came, but the newer homes and the bigger homes, that you don't necessarily know what's happening behind that door, because 1 in 7, you've got to know somebody that's
right.
dealing with this. So it could be friends and neighbors behind closed doors.
You know, before Ben asks this question, I'll tell you just a quick story. We got a letter from a woman who works at the Southwestern Vermont Medical Center in Bennington. We do our Veggie Van Go there, which is a farmer's market distribution that we do at schools and hospitals all over the state. And this woman wrote a letter to the person who was coordinating it saying, you know, I really didn't want to, I didn't think I should go to this. I've got a good job. I'm not homeless. But she has several kids at home and a husband who works
Right.
also. But her friend said, no, you should go. And she went and got some vegetables and went a few times. And she wrote in the letter that she realized when she was bringing this fresh food home that she hadn't been buying the kinds of nourishing food that she wanted
Right.
her kids to eat, that her kids weren't having healthy snacks at home.
Right.
And going to Veggie Van Go, you know, gave her the ability to bring
Right.
more fresh food into their lives, which has all kinds of
Perfect.
benefits.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, and the numbers, I mean, regardless of whether we're trending the right direction or not, the numbers are still pretty staggering. Almost 60,000 Vermonters are living in food insecure households. You know, almost 18,000 children under the age of 18 live in these households. You know, just under 10,000 adults over 60 live in
Right.
insecure households. And those are staggering numbers. And you think of a state the size of Vermont, and 1 in 7 or 1 in 4, whatever
Right.
that number is, all of us have got to know someone that's struggling with this.
That's right. Or who has.
Or who has struggled with it in the past.
And a lot of it's is pride, right?
Well, you know, that is really an issue. You know, there are, if you lose your job, you know, there are literally clubs for people to get together and kind of commiserate and figure out what they're going to do. There's a lot of support out there.
Right.
It's not socially unacceptable to have lost your job,
Right.
right?
Right.
If you get injured and can't work, or you know, lots of things that happen. You get a divorce. There's supports out there for people in the community.
Yeah.
But for some reason, not being able to feed your family
Right.
is an area that I don't know. I don't ever think there's a lack of empathy or sympathy for
Right.
people in Vermont, but there's something so visceral about
That
food.
you can't provide food
You
for your
can't provide
family.
food for your family.
Yeah.
That you know there is shame and stigma around that,
Right.
and that's something that we work really hard at the food bank to address. And you know, I mentioned Veggie Van Go earlier.
Right.
You know, our food shelves do an amazing job of being there for people. We love the Veggie Van Go also because it gives people kind of a festive atmosphere.
Right,
You know, when we
right.
go, there's volunteers there, everyone's happy, there's bright colors and tents, and it really is like a farmer's
Nice.
market.
Neat.
And we have people who say, you know, I don't really want to go to the food shelf in my community,
Bring it to them.
but I'll go to Veggie Van Go. right?
Excellent.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's just schools and
Schools and hospitals. So we do it at 10 schools. We do twice a month at schools and all year round. So even during the summer, the parents and families and kids can still come and shop. And then at 10 hospitals where we're there once a month. We're
and so
looking to
that's for the
expand that.
families of the patients, perhaps, or
It's
because the hospitals.
It can be employees. It can
of
be
course.
patients.
Right.
A lot of times the doctors know. You know, the doctors know
Yeah.
that patients who have diet-related diseases, heart disease, diabetes, COPD, all very closely related to diet,
Right.
will tell their patients, you're not eating enough fruits and
Right,
vegetables.
right.
You need to go to Veggie Van Go.
Oh, cool.
In fact, Mount Escutney Hospital and Health Center, they actually have a prescription pad for Veggie Van Go,
Oh, that's
where the
excellent.
doctors or community health workers will write out a prescription and say, you need to go get some fresh veggies.
Oh, I love
That's
that.
pretty cool.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. One of the other statistics I have in front of me here is 78, actually closer to 79,000 Vermonters receive 3 Squares VT benefits, which most people know as food stamp benefits, which are federally funded.
Yep.
There are concerns that that funding may be cut in Washington.
yes.
Is that something that I'm sure is on your radar?
Absolutely. In fact, right now, we're in round 3. So there have been 3 proposals by the current administration to make rule changes that will reduce the number of people who are eligible or reduce the benefit levels for 3 Squares Vermont. You know, it was just about a year and a half ago when they passed the new Farm Bill. And they pass a Farm Bill every 5 years. And the Farm Bill, the big part of it is funding the SNAP benefits. And that's
Right.
food stamps at the national level is called
Right.
SNAP. And here it's Three Squares, Vermont. And after Congress passed the Farm Bill and decided what the policy should be, now the administration is trying to make rule changes. The latest one is related to what they call heat and eat. So people who get fuel assistance are eligible for a little bump in the amount of Three Squares Vermont assistance they get, because if somebody's getting fuel assistance
don't have the income.
that they're struggling, and,
Right.
and especially in the winter during fuel season. So this, it's kind of, it's complicated bureaucratic stuff, but the bottom line is if this rule gets approved, and it's a comment period is still going on, if the rule gets approved, the average Vermont family who's receiving Three Squares Vermont will see an $82 reduction in their benefit every month.
Whoa,
Now that's a
huge.
week's worth of groceries.
Yes.
Yeah, it's huge.
And is our congressional delegation
Our congressional,
case?
they are working very hard, but I would also encourage the
People.
viewers.
Yeah.
I don't know when this is going to air, but the deadline for comments is December 2nd, so it's
Okay,
coming right
wow.
up.
That's a week from today.
Yeah. We can get something out do a little soundbite or something.
Yeah, I
Because
mean,
they
if you
really
go,
should.
you go to Hunger Free Vermont's website,
Yeah.
hungerfreevt.org. There's a link where you can submit a comment saying that we shouldn't change these rules. The Three Squares Vermont program is really the most efficient and effective way to get people who can't afford enough food the food they need.
Right.
It gives people the ability to go to the grocery store like the rest of us do and choose the food that's right for their families.
Right. And I know there's a lot of education about how to use that funding to the best help from a healthy perspective, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's also a lot of evidence. There's been, in the last 5 years in particular, a lot of studies showing that people who have Three Squares Vermont benefits are healthier, particularly children.
Really
Children
great,
are healthier, do better in school when their families
Right,
have Three Squares Vermont benefits.
So the object is to try to get less people to take advantage of this? What are they saying is a livable wage? That must be.
Yeah, it feels like the object is to reduce the output of money in the
Right,
program, just
right.
to reduce the cost of the program.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We'll get them to that's your job. Call and complain.
Has the governor or the legislature weighed in on this at all to help push back on these proposed rule changes?
I know that the Attorney General has been very active. Probably by the time this airs, there would have been a press conference asking people to submit comments. The Agency of Human Services has been really supportive of getting the word out about this, and I think all the lawmakers in Vermont
Right.
are really supportive of Three Squares Vermont and understand the benefits to the state. And I haven't heard of anyone in Vermont who's been publicly supportive of these rule changes.
Yeah. T.J. Donovan said in some, he called it gratuitous cruelty.
Yeah,
Very serious. Well, I don't blame him.
yeah.
And I see somebody else's name from Capstone. We have a new ED at Capstone.
Yeah, Sue Minter.
Sue Minter, I'm so excited. I heard that about a week or so ago. And because the last time she was on the show, she was doing the Special Olympics.
Right.
So now I
I'm
have
very
to-
excited to be working
Yeah,
with Sue. And
she's so smart.
she actually also has some really tremendous ideas on
I bet she does.
transportation,
Yeah.
with her experience. And
Right.
so we're working on some projects in a consortium. There's actually at Central Vermont, your viewers would probably be interested in this, a consortium of all the social service agencies and the hospital and the healthcare organizations called Thrive.
Oh, I've heard, yes.
And we're all getting together regularly and working together to figure out
Great.
how do we as organizations organize what we do around the families that we're
Great.
serving
Great.
to support and lift them up. Instead of saying, oh, well, you can come here for food and then you have to go talk to somebody else to figure out transportation or housing
Right,
or
right.
health care. Instead, let's, as organizations, get together
Right.
and figure out how do we coordinate ourselves
Good for
and make
you.
it easier
That's great.
for our neighbors.
That's very
great.
cool.
Yeah, one-stop shopping, as they
Right.
always say.
And
Exactly.
just to revisit the Three Squares funding,
Yeah.
just real quick before we move on. So the appropriation was funded by Congress,
Right.
right? So
Yep.
they appropriated funding for that 5-year period, and this happened a year and a half ago. Yeah.
Yep.
It's the administration that is trying to essentially roll back that funding through rule changes.
That's correct.
Essentially,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
Yep.
Doing an end run around Congress.
Yes, exactly. What a
Imagine
surprise.
that, huh?
Yes.
That never happens.
John, when I was doing all the research for the show and stuff, I kept seeing the phrase the food banking industry.
Yeah.
The food bank.
Mhm.
What is that industry? When they say that, obviously you're part of it, but what does
Right.
that, is there a coordinated industry, or is it just those who are sort of involved in
Yeah,
food?
we actually, in the food banking industry, or the food banking world,
Sounds very professional.
it does. We coordinate a lot. There's a national organization called Feeding America,
Oh,
which represents 200 plus member food banks all around the country that represent every county in this country and distribute food. So the Feeding America network, I don't want to get it wrong, but it's something like 4 billion meals a year
oh my God.
distributed.
Staggering.
So I happen to
That's
be on the
crazy.
national board of Feeding America right
Wow.
now as one of the member board members.
Yeah.
And we love to share our ideas. So the food banks get together twice a year, all
Yeah.
the executive directors, and there's learning conferences for other staff, just so we can, states are the laboratories of democracy. Well,
Yeah.
kind of food banks are the laboratories
Yeah.
of
Great.
food security, and we try different things all over the country and share all those learnings.
Excellent.
And Feeding America does a great job of keeping us together,
That's it.
as well as making sure that donations of food are available and distributed around the country. So, the big
That's a good
national and international food companies, the
Right.
Mondelez, the ADMs, the Kraft, General Mills, they all have relationships with Feeding America, and food donations can flow through the national organization and be distributed all around the
Well,
country.
you have a lot of corporate sponsors here too, don't you?
Oh, we do.
Shaw's and
Oh, sure, and
all of the big
Hannaford, and
Hannafords.
Price
right?
Chopper, I mean, all the big chains, and really the entire food industry in Vermont
Right.
is very supportive of the food bank.
For sure.
We get almost half a million pounds of fresh produce grown in Vermont donated to the food bank every year.
Wow.
So that is really actually quite fascinating to think that there's a national network around food banks and distributing food resources. Is that group involved at all in disaster relief, disaster recovery? Because I can imagine that's a major need in an area that's experiencing
Right.
crisis.
It is, and
is
that's,
food.
I think, the Feeding America network really shines in disasters. So, if you want to talk about, it was a number of years ago now, but
With
Tropical
Irene.
Storm Irene
For sure.
came through
Yeah.
Vermont. We had trucks and drivers from other food banks coming up and helping us. We had food donations flowing in from Feeding America and
Great.
from other food banks across the country, or mostly in the region. And we've done likewise when Superstorm Sandy hit
You went down there.
on the Atlantic coast.
Yeah.
Yeah, our chief operations officer went down with a driver and a truck and spent a week, helping
Wow.
them at Superstorm Sandy. And Feeding America as a national organization raises tremendous amounts of food and money around natural disasters and make sure it gets funneled right to the location. So Hurricane Maria, was it, in Puerto Rico?
Oh, right. That was
Huge effort, and really it was because of the efforts of the Feeding America network that the Puerto Rico Food Bank is really a shining star in recovery in Puerto Rico, and still is. It's really an amazing
Great.
organization.
Well, in that case, you're talking about ships and planes, not trucks.
Right.
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 Yeah, at that stage of the game.
Yeah.
But I can imagine where a national network like that gives you an elasticity that you couldn't possibly have in a local organization.
Absolutely.
Right.
Especially in a state like Vermont, we're surrounded with great neighbors, and the New Hampshire Food Bank and the food banks in New York and Massachusetts and the Good Shepherd Food Bank in Maine. We're all very close and we share a lot.
Right.
But that national network creates so much support for us.
Yeah, I
Well,
can
and you've been
imagine
there,
that.
how long have you been there? 10
I've been there 10 years
10
now.
years,
Yeah.
right. Former state employee, too.
That's right, for almost 10 years.
Almost
Yeah,
10
well,
years, that's right.
they pick good people.
Yes, they do.
So one thing I want to touch on your strategic plan really quick. You laid out 4 outcomes, which really kind of details your vision for what you want Vermont to look like in this space. And I'll kind of cover them really quick, or 2 of them anyway. The Vermont Food Bank, and this is one of the goals that or the outcomes that you laid out. The Vermont Food Bank efficiently gathers and shares a diverse mix of quality food and to better meet the food needs of people in Vermont. I think that's what's interesting. A couple things that I noticed there is efficiently gathers and shares and the diverse mix of quality food, right? So you're not looking for just dry goods and shelf-stable goods. You're looking for fresh vegetables, like you said.
Right, and when we're out actually sourcing food, so some of our food just flows in donations.
Right.
For instance, we get from Hannaford, we get 2 tractor trailer loads a month of what they call salvage, which is cans that got dented and multi-packs that broke open and boxes that got crushed. And it comes from their reclamation center in Maine. And that's basically an assortment of what's in the center of the store, of the grocery store. But a lot of the food that we're distributing now, we're actively out there sourcing it because there's not enough just donated food flowing in.
Right.
So we have a purchase program. We're working with farmers and to get fresh produce distributed or donated. And it really is about, first of all, what do people tell us that they want? And the folks that we're serving say first of all, we want fresh fruits and vegetables. We want lean meats and low-fat dairy. And then we want, breads and whatever. But the top needs, the top desires are fresh fruits and vegetables and lean meats and low-fat dairy. And so we're actively seeking more and more of that. We're not meeting the need now, and so we can't not do enough. One of the things that we're doing, I'll just mention, is this year we're going to be going into the legislature and asking for an appropriation for a program we call Vermonters Feeding Vermonters, where we've been doing this for 2 years now. We're forward contracting with Vermont growers for fresh Vermont produce,
Right.
Apples, squash, onions, carrots, lettuce and tomatoes, all the wonderful produce that's grown here. Supporting Vermont agriculture, supporting the environment because all this food is consumed within 50 miles of where it's grown.
Right.
And supporting our neighbors and creating new customers for delicious Vermont produce. I mean, you think about, a mom with a limited food budget, is she going to buy that couple boxes of macaroni and cheese or a head of broccoli, which probably cost about the same? Well, let's say she's been going to Veggie Van Gogh's and knows her kids will actually eat that broccoli and has tried that delicious fresh Vermont broccoli, sees it in the grocery store and says, it's not a chance. I'm not taking a chance by buying this. I know it's good for my kids. I know they'll eat it. And I know it's fresh and healthy. So we're going to be asking the legislature for a $500,000 appropriation, which is a big lift here in Vermont. But we'd love people to call their legislators and tell them that they support Vermonters Feeding Vermonters.
Okay, task number 2.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got
You
to
can
call
go-
Washington and you have to call your legislature.
We have a separate website, web page. It's called feedingvermonters.org. And people can go there and learn about Vermonters Feeding Vermonters.
Excellent. Good. John, you said before, you sort of said at the end, that we're not meeting the need now.
Right.
There's more demand
There's
than
more
there is.
demand.
There's more
Do you
demand.
have any idea of what that demand looks like? Is it, I don't know how you would judge it, but,
Yeah.
but
Well,
we
we
have
do.
10% more, 20% more? Or?
Yeah, I would say we're probably meeting 40% of the need out there, and
Now, is that you, the food bank, and all of the,
Yes.
so it's the whole food network that we just
It's
talked
the whole,
about?
right, the whole charitable food network.
Wow.
Yeah, a food shelf will get, 50 to 70% of their food from the Vermont Food Bank. But they're out there getting donations from their
Yes,
local
right,
communities
right.
and also going to the local grocery store and,
Yeah.
and buying those things that they don't get enough donated.
Yeah,
So that concept that you talked about, where you're, basically purchasing fruits and vegetables ahead of time,
Yeah.
is an interesting one, because I can imagine that creates efficiencies for the farmer, knowing that they've already sold these products.
That's right.
Right. They've
That's right.
already sold it, so there's a guarantee there.
That's right.
And any farmer would love to
Right.
have a guarantee about anything,
Right.
because
and
farming is a pretty guarantee-less industry.
A nice thing too about our program is if farmers have contracts with the local grocery stores too.
Right.
But the grocery stores will only take produce that's a certain size and shape and color, and all that's written into the contract. We are much more flexible. If the carrots are too big, that's fine.
Right.
We'll take them.
Yeah.
So we actually give
If the potato has a foot on
right.
it, we'll take it. Yeah.
So we actually, have that added value to the farmer where, maybe part of the crop, the color doesn't turn out right because of the weather, or it grows too big, or it's not big enough.
Right.
We'll take it,
yeah,
Yeah.
and they're still getting paid.
And that helps to pick up some of their what could have been a loss, right, from the grocery store. But it seems like there's not enough, even that, being an opportunity, there's not enough of that necessarily to meet the demand for.
That's right. And that's one of the reasons we're going in and asking for financial support from the state. We really see it as a win for the farmers, a win for the people in Vermont, and we're reducing healthcare costs by making sure people are eating fresh, healthy food, and supporting kids to learn in school, and parents to be able to really go and focus on their job,
Yeah.
and not have to worry about where that
can't
next
sit in
meal
school
is
and
coming
be
from.
hungry.
You can't.
No, impossible.
So, assuming the legislature appropriates this $500,000, what would how would it be spent?
Every dollar appropriated by the legislature would actually go toward purchasing food from
Right,
Vermont farms.
So directly to purchasing the food.
Yeah, and that it could be fruits, it could be vegetables. We'd love to move into proteins too, to do some dairy and
Right.
maybe some meat.
Great. Could you talk a little bit, speaking of foods out there, the gleaning program? I just
Yeah.
love that. I talk about, I went one time, like 10 years ago, but it made such an impact on me because it actually changed the way I deal with food in my own house. That's a true statement. I really use it as much as I can instead of dumping it, which is a
Yeah,
sad
and I'll
thing.
tell you about gleaning, but you mentioned volunteering, and it sounds like volunteering was a transformative experience for you.
It was.
Yeah.
I'm very serious about
Yeah.
that. It completely changed my mind about how I deal with food, because I was a very bad throw it out kind of person. I've had some leftover stuff, but
Well, if you can't throw it out now, at least if you're not gonna do something with it, you've got to put it in the
well, that's what I do.
Compost.
compost. Exactly.
Well, no, I find some other use for it because I didn't realize. Well, I'll be quiet. You tell them.
Well, gleaning is actually the act of going into a farmer's field and harvesting what the farmer's not going to harvest, which could be for a lot of reasons. I mentioned before, something's too big, too small, not the right color, grows at the wrong time. The example I use a lot is a farmer grows a couple rows of spinach, goes through and harvests that, and doesn't plan on doing any more spinach harvest, but doesn't get around to plowing that under, and the spinach regrows. Well, then the farmer will call the food bank and say, hey, I'm ready to plow those rows under, but there's all this spinach. Can you guys come and get it? So we'll send the word out to our volunteers, like Pat,
There you go.
who show up in the morning with our gleaning coordinator, go out in the field, harvest all that food. It goes straight from that field onto one of our trucks and gets driven to one of our network partners. It might be a meal site, it might be a food shelf, and distributed out, fresh, usually organic food straight from farm fields in Vermont to people who would not otherwise be able to afford that.
Yeah, that was
pretty
quite
cool.
an experience. But they just pile the stuff here, and you cut it up and save the good stuff, and that all gets packaged. And at the end of the day, when you saw all the packaged goods and what you did, it was just incredible. Shame
And you
on
can
me
find
all
out
these
all
years.
about that and really all about the Vermont Food Bank at our website, which is vtfoodbank.org.
Now there's just reminded me, I had one big apple tree, and one year, I don't know what happened with this apple tree, but there were apples everywhere. It was just like the best season we ever had, and I called a group that came over, picked all the apples, saved me some for applesauce, better on the pies, but they took it and they brought it to food banks, and then they told me how much weight,
Right.
what food banks is that a part of yours, or is that a
So
separate entity?
there are separate, there's groups in communities all over the state that
Yeah.
do work like that. We don't do backyard cleaning,
Oh.
but there are organizations
Yeah,
that do
well,
that.
that's what
and,
this
you know,
was, and
and
I decided that the food bank should get it rather than the deer that hang out in
Yeah.
our,
So
in
if
our
you
yard. all
have
day
apple
long.
trees,
Yes.
That's right.
Well, what a cool deal. I mean, I felt so good about it that my apples went
yeah.
for people who needed
you know,
food.
people will often ask me too, well, I have a huge garden and I always have too much.
Yeah.
Can I bring that to the food bank?
Come on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But
Yes,
what I
of
say
course.
is first, find your local food shelf or meal site.
Yes.
And you can do that by calling 211 or the
Yeah.
town clerk or going on the food bank's website. We have a food shelf locator.
Nice.
Because you don't want the food bank to have to transport it if we don't have to. So if
Keep
you've
it
got
local.
Yeah,
keep it local.
Yeah.
But if there's too much, if you've got a truckload, and some people do this, they have a pickup truckload of squash that would overwhelm a local food shelf. Definitely bring it to us, and we'll make sure it gets
That's great.
distributed.
That's pretty cool.
So
I wouldn't
yeah,
have even thought of that, but that's a great, it's like, oh, I forgot to harvest all the squash last year, and now I have 3 times as much as I need.
well, yeah, because I
bring it
would
to the
never have
food
eaten
bank.
those apples in a million years. Me
Yeah,
and the deer.
right.
That was it. And I thought,
And
Let
here,
somebody else
here
do
in
it.
Central Vermont too, I'm going to give a plug to Central Vermont Community Harvest, which if you hadn't had her on, you should have Allison Levin on. It is a great organization. They do the gleaning right here in Central Vermont. The food bank runs gleaning programs in the Burlington area, in Rutland, and in Brattleboro. In other parts of the state, gleaning happens, but there's other local groups. So
Right.
Central Vermont Community Harvest.
and you are also involved with the Community Kitchen Academy, are you not?
Yes, we are a partner in that program.
That is just, we did a show there one time, about 2 years ago, and the chef who was there at the time,
Was that David?
no, it was a woman.
Oh, Jamie Eisenberg.
Jane, I adore that woman. I was like the chief fan of her fan club. And then I went over, this woman makes pies
Yeah.
on her property in, not Williston, over by the ski areas.
Richmond?
Anyway, Richmond, maybe some.
Richmond,
She
yeah.
has this place, and you
Yeah.
walk in, and you can leave 10 cents, or you can leave the full amount, whether it's $12 a pie or something, but it's up to you. Take the pie you want and leave a contribution. I mean, that woman is amazing. I loved her to
Well,
death.
and let me mention Community Kitchen Academy.
Yes,
A lot
please.
of people don't know about that. It is a partnership program in Burlington. It's a partnership with Feeding Chittenden, which is the food shelf there, associated with CBOEO. And in Barrie, it's a partnership with Capstone Community Action. And it is a 12-week culinary training program for unemployed and underemployed Vermonters.
Yeah.
And it is my favorite thing to do in my job is to go to CKA graduation and to hear the stories of the students and how our chef instructors
Right.
like Jamie,
Yeah.
Dave Eiler, who just moved on and are really transforming lives. To hear the students talk
Incredible.
about graduating from this program, and who say I don't feel like I've ever accomplished anything in my life, and here I am graduating, and the program actually is certified, so you can get up to 9 college credits for graduating.
A lot of the kids just go right from there to jobs. I mean,
Yeah,
they,
we have a
and-
90% job placement rate.
Yeah, it's
That's crazy.
They invited, when I worked part-time for like the last 10 years for Barrie City, and they invited me, Steve McKenzie, and a couple of other people from Barrie for lunch
Yeah.
to die. It was like a 5-star restaurant. They just kept coming out with the entree and the hors d'oeuvres and the desserts. It was spectacular.
And a lot of
It
that
was really
food is food that would otherwise go to waste. That's picked up at grocery stores all around the region.
of course, I didn't even think
and
about
taken
that.
straight there. So it's food, when we go to the grocery store and pick up, say, the cull produce, it might not have enough life left on it
Yeah.
to be redistributed through a food shelf.
Yeah.
So it all goes straight to the Community Kitchen Academy, and the chef that morning opens the cooler and says, okay, what are we gonna make? What do we got in here?
That's great.
And they make some amazing food.
Yeah,
they really do.
they catered, I know, it's the job fair that's at the Barry Auditorium. I don't know if they've done it recently, but the last couple of years they were actually catering, and the food was incredible.
Yeah.
And so then they go and get a job. I mean, it's amazing.
It's crazy.
Good stuff.
Looking at some of the programs that you've got here, a couple that jump out at me. Backpack program. You want to tell us a little bit about that
Yeah,
one?
the backpack serves about 2,500
Oh, my
kids across the state every week, and it's for families that sign up. Their kids on Friday afternoon get a bag with a couple meals worth of kid-friendly, shelf-stable food that gets discreetly tucked into their kid's backpack so they can bring it home for the weekend. And it's all kid-sized, pop-top, so the adult doesn't have to be home for the kids to be able to use the food.
nice.
We hear from the students and the parents and the teachers about how impactful it is, that the teachers notice the students coming in on Monday morning much more ready to learn because they realized that before they were not eating over the weekend, and coming in Monday morning, behavior problems, going to the nurse.
They're hungry.
They're hungry.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
This
Yeah.
is very upsetting,
Yeah.
sitting here talking
Well, and this
to
is
you, John.
essentially a supplement,
Right.
some of the free and reduced lunch that kids get.
Right.
That's right.
And because that they're eating food while they're at school because they have access to these programs.
Absolutely.
Not so much over the weekend, which
That's
is where
right.
something like this is kind of cool.
Now, like the Rotary here does a backpack program.
Yes, they
but
do.
Is that separate from yours, or do you coordinate?
We coordinate with them. It's separate in that the food bank has a limited capacity. And every year that I've been at the food bank for 10 years, we've been expanding the number of schools
Right.
that do backpack. But we can't serve every school that wants it or needs it.
Sure.
We try to look for the schools with the most need, and we're going to serve the most number of students we can. And so there are a number of schools in Vermont that run their own backpack programs, or like a Rotary will run it.
Right, right.
So we definitely talk to Rotary, and we gave them our model and coordinate with them to make sure that
Because they're really proud of that. That's a big thing over at
They
the
should be proud of
Montpelier
that.
Rotary. Yeah, they
Yeah.
are. That's great. What else is there? There's like
Oh, there's
forever.
lots to
I don't know
talk
how
about.
you do this, John. This is
I have a
this
lot
is not a
of-
40-hour-a-week job, may
I have a
just say,
lot of
right,
really
John?
talented people,
you
you
do.
know.
Yeah.
So there's a couple call outs we should make to some of the local businesses that support the food bank, including places like Black River Produce, Cabot Cheese, Green Mountain Creamery, Curry Green Mountain, Hannaford Supermarket. There's quite a few of them.
Yeah.
Obviously, they make quite a bit of a difference to a statewide organization like this.
I say any organization in Vermont
Bring it
that
on.
that manufactures or distributes or grows food is connected to the Vermont Food Bank, and I thank them all because we can't do the work we do without them. The food bank is one piece of a chain. We try and keep everything connected, but the food has to come from somewhere and it has to go somewhere. I'd also like to call out all the local businesses that come and volunteer.
Oh, I bet.
We can't do the work we do without our volunteers.
That's great.
Places like Ben and Jerry's, National Life Group,
Right.
King Arthur Flour, they drive up to Barry from Norwich
Oh,
with vans
really?
full of people and volunteer sorting food in our distribution center.
That's great.
Well, I think Ben and Jerry's is actually required that you do a certain number of volunteer hours.
Yeah. And Keurig Dr. Pepper also, they do that. National Life Group does that. That's the King Arthur people. They're doing so. A lot of corporations. Dealer.com in Burlington, they send people over. it's really fun, and it's a great team building activity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have different groups from the same company. They'll come in and they'll compete
They'll
to see how many pounds
Yeah.
of food they can
That's
sell.
cool.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
cool.
It's really great.
And it's kind of a fun thing to do too, like outside your normal work.
Absolutely.
Your routine. Yeah.
Well, when we were there, we brought a photographer with us, and I think it was National Life was there.
Yeah.
And the people that were comfortable to talk in the camera, they were so thrilled. They were just so delighted to be there and just felt like they'd really done a good thing, and,
Yeah.
and the company supports them. They get paid for that time.
Yeah.
And what a great deal.
Well, they have done a
Win-win,
good
as they
thing.
say. Huh?
They have done a good thing.
Yeah,
You know,
for
they're,
sure.
they're literally feeding their neighbors.
That's
Yeah,
great.
well, so I'm a member at City Market, for example, right? And they have, which seems like a lot of places are doing this now, but they have like the Roundup or the
Yep.
Rally for Change type stuff. So like you get, you buy your groceries and you have like, it's X dollars and 58 cents or
Right.
something. So
Oh,
they
round up?
Do you want to round
Yeah,
up?
right, that's
you
great.
know,
Yeah,
do an
do
extra
that.
42
Yeah,
cents,
right.
and then we'll donate the 42 cents. And they always split it. 50% goes to the food bank, and the other 50% gets broken up among other charities
Nice.
and rotates every month.
Right.
But
And you don't feel it as much. You just round it up.
no, like we always do it because
Yeah.
you feel good about it or whatever, and it helps. And there was it was a couple months ago. They put up at their South End location, put up a big sign with how much they'd actually
Oh, that's
donated
great.
over
That's
the
great.
last month or whatever. It's like $24,000
Oh my God!
in
See, it adds
I
up.
think it was a 1 month period or whatever it was.
That's great.
And it's like that's just rounding up from change,
Right.
and that little bit over all these people that do it over X period of time really adds up.
There are so many businesses and organizations that support the food bank, but just because it's just happening now, I'll call out a brand new business right here, not a brand new business, but new here in Montpelier, Caledonia Spirits.
Oh, right, sure.
The Bar Hill Distillery.
Yeah.
In their bar, there's no tipping of the bar staff. All the tips go to a designated nonprofit organization.
Oh, that's
And so
great.
for the month of December, that's going to be the Vermont Food Bank.
Yeah,
So I encourage people to go for a cocktail at Bar Hill.
There's,
Tip generously.
down in
Yes,
Waitsfield, what
exactly.
is that, the brewery down there? Because they
In
did the
Waitsfield?
same
Oh, yes,
thing.
they do.
Every month, because I'm on
Lawson's.
Prevent
Yeah.
Child
Yep.
Abuse, and they did the same thing.
And we'll be working with Lawson's also.
They have,
Oh, great.
they have an amazing tap room there, by the way.
Yeah.
Like
should go on the road with
quite
ours.
possibly, dare I say, the best in Vermont.
Oh, really?
And I've been to a lot of breweries, and their tap room is
There are a lot of them in Vermont.
Yeah, there's a lot of them in
The
Vermont.
newest
yeah.
thing here.
Yeah.
John, I found your 2019 successes. It was a large document
Yeah.
of all of the good things you've done. Could you summarize what sort of sticks in your mind as the biggest accomplishments? And the one thing I had picked out was the school breakfast and lunch program, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, I like to point out as our largest accomplishment, I think, inspiring Vermonters to help each other. It's
great.
really, it is the volunteering, the donating, and the advocating that keeps people employed, keeps kids learning, keeps our older neighbors healthy and active and part of our communities. As far as the stuff we do, I'm really proud of Vermonters Feeding Vermonters and how we've been able to ramp that up
That's great.
in 2019.
We are a generous state individually. Everybody here, I think, has got a big heart.
Absolutely.
They do.
Yep.
You just ask them and explain, and they'll come right up. They'll come right up and do what they're supposed to do or should
Well,
do.
tell me some other things that we've done in 20.
Oh, well, let's see. No, I was really, I put the school breakfast and lunch.
Yeah.
I remember one time I got yelled at. We were over at Montpelier High School to talk about poverty and stuff, and somebody was proud that the school breakfast and lunch numbers went skyrocketing, and I said, that's terrible, and they dumped on me, and I said, no, you don't understand. It's thank God we've got that, but there's something wrong if the numbers have gone up.
Well-
But that's a fabulous program, and
Yeah.
a member of my family lost a job, and they joined this program till she was able to get on her feet again and get a new job, and she got off of it, but the kids got to eat, and It's
And
a
that's,
great
you know,
program.
that's a great point, Pat, because we know that on average, a family that accesses the Charitable Food Network will go to a food shelf or a meal site 8 times in a year. So
So relatively short period of time.
relatively short period of time. This is really
It's a stopgap
it's
thing.
something that people use
Yeah.
to fill in.
Right.
You know, there are certainly folks, we know people who are on Three Squares Vermont, the benefits do not last the whole month. So near the end of the month, there's more demand at our food
Right.
shelves and meal sites. But for a lot of people, food insecurity is kind of episodic.
Right,
And
right.
to have these programs available, you know, the number of people getting Three Squares Vermont benefits in 2009 went way up. You know, because of the recession.
Right.
So
Losing jobs.
numbers went way up and stayed up for a long time.
Yeah.
And just recently, in the last couple of years, they've started coming down. Actually, interestingly, the numbers have just gone down to the level that they were before the recession.
Oh.
But it's taken this long.
Wow.
But, you know, like you said, somebody loses a job, there's a
she
divorce,
was-
there's an
yeah.
injury, you can't work. There's
Right.
all kinds of reasons that
Yeah, it was
people might
there
need some
for her
help.
when she needed it, and then when she didn't need it, she stopped using the benefit. I thought that was great.
Well, so that's interesting because you mentioned that it seems to be episodic in how people utilize the services. Do you notice any trends around what causes people to be in that situation where they need to use those services?
You know, our statistics tell us that we serve 153,000 people in Vermont every year, in one time or another.
Wow.
I think there's 153,000 different stories. You know, really, I just heard one of our drivers in Brattleboro has been seeing somebody who's coming to a lot of our distributions and getting a lot of food. And Glenn, our driver, he makes relationships really easily.
That's it.
And anyway, he found out that this gentleman is collecting food for a dozen veterans who are living, as he wrote in the email, in quotes, off the grid, which to me sounds like maybe they're homeless.
Right. Right.
And so, you know, there's one example. There's another gentleman actually in Brattleboro too, Don, who has a heart condition and couldn't work. In fact, he had $57 a month left to live on after his expenses.
Whoa.
And his doctor told him he needed a heart transplant, but he wasn't well enough to be on the transplant list. And he had to change his diet. Well, you
Right.
can't buy vegetables on
Right.
$57 a month.
Right.
So Don started coming to all of our Veggie Van Goes, and again, Glenn created a relationship with him, and he actually transformed his health and is now on the transplant
That's
list.
great, John.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Oh.
So, and I can imagine something like, you know, you have an unplanned expense, for
right.
example, and a lot of, and we talked about this earlier in the show, where oftentimes the most elastic thing in your budget is food,
It's food,
right?
right.
Because that's the
Yeah.
thing that you can control month to month.
Yeah. That's
right.
You can't say, oh, I'm only going to pay $800 for my rent this month instead of the
Yeah.
$1,000.
not.
Right. That doesn't
Yeah,
work so
right,
well. You go to
exactly.
the bank and it's like, oh, I'm only going to put $100 towards my car payment this month. They don't usually
Or the
like
car
that.
breaks down.
Or
Yeah,
the,
right.
or
And
the
you-
car
you
breaks
know,
down.
Right.
You
What
have
was
those
the
unplanned
recent
expenses.
survey that showed that half of Vermonters couldn't
No,
weather
over.
$1,000.
Over
Oh, that they don't have
$1,000.
$1,000 set aside anywhere.
No,
Right.
that like they
Is
could.
that-
Yeah, it was basically that they couldn't handle a $1,000 unplanned expense.
Right. Yeah. Right. Because
And it
nobody
was
has
over
that money
60%.
set
I
aside.
think actually it wasn't
Yeah.
even just half. It was like
It's
over
paycheck
60.
to paycheck.
Yeah.
And you know, that's a large part of the people that our whole charitable food system is there to serve.
Well, I said it on the video. I just was put on a medication that was $400 a month.
Yeah.
Nope. So we
No
had
thanks.
we had a plan B, but what do you do with that
What do
stuff?
you do with
know?
that?
This
That's
is-
right.
If you don't eat this, if you don't take the pill, something bad's going to happen. So where do you get the $400?
That's right.
Maybe not.
You know, and you know, we talk about older Vermonters. I think something like 26,000 older Vermonters that we serve. But you know, people are. I'm sure you've had shows about this. the number of people retiring in Vermont every year. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
Yeah, it's
we're
huge.
aging really rapidly.
Yeah.
And some people are actually what I call retiring into poverty. All of a sudden, they have a fixed income and no expectation that
No.
that's going to go up.
Right.
Yeah.
And the expenses keep going up. And
Yeah,
like you
right,
said, all of
right.
a sudden,
Yeah.
you need a medication that's $400 a month.
It's like, I don't think
What
so.
do you do?
Yeah, I
What
know.
do you do?
So there was an interesting thing that was published, I want to say late last year, about what it was looking forward at, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, what the best job prospects were in Vermont.
Uh-huh.
So it was a list of the top, I think, 10 job prospects for careers.
Right.
5 of the top 10 were healthcare related.
Oh, wow. Oh, there you
And
go.
largely because of that demographic issue, where we have so many people retiring out of the workforce. And this is not unique to Vermont.
No, it's not.
You see it perhaps more in Vermont because our workforce is aging a little, our population is aging a little faster. But this is happening across the country, and healthcare is a huge industry because of that.
Yes, it is. John, you talked a little bit in one article I read about your new online resource hub. Is that something on your website which will help people to find out where all the resources are? It's a very good
Yes.
website, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I love this show always allows me to go through all the websites, and it's very easy. I judge them by how easy it is to find what I want and to get around. It's a very
If she can find it, then you're doing well.
Well,
great pictures too.
Yeah, thank you. And we do have resources on there if you need help to find a food shelf or a meal site.
Right.
I also always recommend that people call 211,
211, right.
which now will be 24 hours again.
Yes,
Oh, yeah,
that's
there was
great.
a thing
Thank
about
goodness
that,
for
yeah.
And we actually know that the majority of the people that click on our website are looking for assistance, which makes me feel really good. I don't want it to be just something for people to, I want people who are donating to the food bank to be able to see what we're doing and feel really good about it. But what I really want is for the people who need access to healthy
Right.
food to be able to find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how many sites do you have around the state?
So we have 3 distribution centers. The Vermont Food Bank, I didn't even say this, we're the only food bank in Vermont. We serve the entire state. And we serve we partner with 215 organizations who are the food shelves, the meal sites, the after-school programs, the senior centers. We have facilities in Barrie, in the Wilson Industrial Park, in
Right.
Brattleboro, and in Rutland.
Oh,
So
Right.
we cover the whole state. Although we serve 65% of the state out of Barrie, we cover the whole state through those 3 facilities.
that's great. And how do you work with the food shelves and stuff around, or or they're on their own? Sort
No,
of?
they are all our partners.
Oh, are they?
Yeah,
Okay.
and we couldn't do what we do without them.
Yeah.
Like we have a hunger action conference every year in May in Killington, and it's a real privilege to spend time with the people who are working, mostly volunteers,
Right.
at those food shelves and meal sites all over the state. We can't be that last mile as the Vermont Food Bank for every community, and it really is. It takes people in that community to know what their neighbors need.
What do you see, John, going forward? I mean, obviously, you'd like to be more than 40% meeting the needs. How you see yourself moving that number up?
Well, we're going to continue to try and raise as much money as we can to expand our impact. We're going to continue to advocate for a really robust federal food assistance system.
Right.
For every meal that a food bank around the country is able to deliver, the SNAP program delivers 9 meals. So we're 1/10
Right.
of the food assistance that people are getting who just can't afford to close that gap
Right.
in their budgets. We need that robust federal safety net, and really expanding that is the best way to reduce the need for the food bank's work.
Right.
But on the other hand, our focus is really on making sure that the food that we're distributing is the freshest and healthiest and most nourishing that it can be.
Right.
because we really see ourselves as a healthcare organization in Vermont, and as an organization that can really have an impact on people's health. Fresh, local, like I said, fresh fruits and vegetables, and low-fat meats and dairies. Dairy is what people want, and it's also the most expensive food in the grocery store.
Exactly. And then you have it doesn't last that long either, so
That's
it's
right.
got to be put out there and then eaten fairly
Right.
quickly.
Have you talked with hospitals and healthcare providers at all about methods of funding, food shelves or food delivery sites? Because, for example, because of some of the laws in place around, what nonprofit healthcare providers can do with profits, right, at the end of the year. They kind of have discretion to invest those dollars if they have left over at the end of the year, what they can do with those dollars, right? And they can, for example, 2 years ago, UVM Medical Center invested in housing,
Right.
because they saw that as an immediate need in the community that would have long-term health benefits. And this sounds like another example of, if you have healthcare providers,
Sure.
nonprofit healthcare providers that have funding at the end of the year, it sounds like a great place to put that.
And all of our healthcare providers in Vermont are nonprofit, in a way.
Yes, that's true.
Right.
And yes, so we do partner with the healthcare world. I would say a particularly good example is Northeastern Vermont Regional Hospital, NVRH, in St. Johnsbury, where we're part of like Thrive here in Central Vermont, we're part of a collective impact initiative up there called NEK Prosper, which NVRH is making really fabulous investments in all the different, what they call social determinants of health. So they're the things that aren't related to going to the doctor or going to the hospital that affect whether you're healthy or not, and affect the well-being of individuals and the whole community. So things like housing, things like food access, things like economic stability. So I'm also, for better or for worse, actually it's for better, I'm on the governing board of One Care Vermont.
Okay.
are you?
So,
Oh.
so very engaged.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
Yeah, very engaged in what's happening
Good.
at the state level.
Yep.
And I feel really good about being a voice at that table that's
Yeah.
making sure that hunger is part of the
For
conversation.
sure. Well, I think there's been so many changes in how treatment is delivered. We
Yeah.
had a show here relating to opioids, and they were looking at what would help you get better, massages,
Right.
Psychological discussions. I mean, just things, and food is right up there.
Food is right up there.
One.
There's a huge movement nationally about food and health.
Yeah,
I mean, it
right.
seems obvious, but we kind of moved away from that for a while. But it's coming back to people realizing that proper nutrition is key to proper
And
health.
there's so many people like myself, but having had cancer, food's right up
Yeah.
there with what I'm supposed to be doing.
You are what you eat.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
right.
John, this has been thrilling. We have run out of time.
Indeed.
The hour went too fast. Thank you very much for coming.
Well, I appreciate the
Thank you.
invitation, and I'd
Well,
love
we'll
to come
get the
back
word
sometime.
out.
Thank you
Yes,
so much.
anytime. Thank you for listening in. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.